A contemporary music critic has suggested that the four greatest musicians who ever lived in alphabetical order are Bach, Beethoven, the Grateful Dead, and Mozart, in that order. And we're delighted to have with us, however accurate that music critic may be, we're delighted to have with us Jerry Garcia, the founder and lead guitar and vocalist of the Grateful Dead, who's spoken of as one of the most prolific musicians today. And Jerry explains that that's because he's crazed, he's obsessed. We'll find out in a minute when we meet Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead and find out what he believes. We'll see you. Got it? Jerry Garcia, the question, I guess, that the program asks at the beginning and the end, and most of the time during the middle, is who are you? And what turns you on? And so just for a change, instead of sneaking up on you, can I come right in straight and honest and say, who's Jerry Garcia and what turns him on?
Well, I'm somebody who plays music, or tries to, and I think of myself as a person who's a music student. Mm-hmm. And what turns me on is being able to play and being able to continue developing. I think that's it fairly simply, and then there's concentric circles of greater and lesser turn-ons. I mean,
Did you mean I read at one point where you said I'm a slow learner. I'm not very talented, so I really have to work to learn.
Yeah.
And to grow. And you put a lot of emphasis on the growth, on the experimentation, on the change. You said I don't want to end in the cul-de-sac of success.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I agree. Well, my feelings about that are that that there is a convention in what you could broadly describe as entertainment that states essentially, once you have your act down, once you have it together, keep on doing it. That's what the people want. They're coming back to see Judy Garland for the umpty billionth time, and whatever. They're there to see you do your little dance, and I feel that that's a serious limit on anybody who feels that they're an artist, rather than an entertainer. Not to say that being an entertainer is no good, but I would rather think that I'm involved in something that's more open-ended than that. I'd rather not be able to see the end that clearly.
Right. And it's probably a thing of level. It may even be, I don't know this, but one of the reasons that the Grateful Dead now are actually playing in 4 different groups, that you do this, even encourage this. I mean, you're doing solo work,
yes,
albums with the group. Partly it's explained by the cost of travel and just putting the show together and putting it on.
Right. There are other less obvious reasons that I think that have a lot to do with our attitude toward what we're doing and our feelings about what it is and what it should be. And we felt that having reached the end of a certain level of that cul-de-sac that we were talking about, that in terms of, for us, or for a rock and roll group, for a performing musical group, the end of that really is the colossal, what we call the mega gig, the huge stadium, that we played in those, and that's where we ended up in terms of the largeness of our audience, the greatness of demand for what we were doing, and so forth and so on. We felt that that was a dead end, and that there was no place to go from there, and that at that point the experience for us got to be one that was totally controlled in the sense of it's airplanes to motel, motel to gig. Yeah. Backstage, heavy security, nobody near the stage, and what's worse is that it's also reflected in the way those very large venues deal with people. They deal with them in that sort of cattle prod methodology, lots of cops, lots of frisk lines, lots of tightness, and we felt that what we were doing and what we wanted to do was definitely not that, that was clearly not it. So then it became a question of, well, what do we want to do? And since that represented the end of the line developmentally, of what's there in America, what exists. That's it. That's the end of the line. You can't go anywhere bigger. There's no place bigger than those huge, the Astrodome or whatever, right? That's it. So from there, it's a question of what we would like to do is improve the quality of the experience, both on the level of what we're doing amongst ourselves and how we interact with the audience and what the audience experiences when we're there. In that sense, we're the Don Quixotes of rock and roll. We're we're doing something nobody else cares to do, which is trying to figure out how to make the experience which we value and which our audience values, something that's more in line with what it feels like, which is a positive sort of outpouring of good energy. And that's the reason we stopped, was to think about it and to not have to continually be neat,
Just crank it up. And
yeah, we didn't want to do that.
I thought the neatest thing that you said about the big amphitheater thing, I was reminded of this, it's so expensive to travel that you said we ought to do one of two things: either develop a space, a huge Astrodome or whatever, that would be our home base, that the Grateful Dead would play in, and then other groups could use part of the year.
Right.
And I was going to suggest the Candlestick Park might be available for you.
That's too big.
Oh, sorry. And secondly, I like your other idea that they declare you a national resource.
Right.
The government could fund.
That would be very sensible,
Well,
in my opinion.
Go back. I want to know more about you, but first, while we're talking about the Grateful Dead, in the beginning, it wasn't always, at least my recollection now, it's hard for me to go, I'm going back to the 67, 68, when you guys were playing with Jefferson Airplane and Quicksilver Messenger Service and these groups. There's one story, at least, about a drug experience. Now, I know that you were a friend of Ken Kesey's, and that you talked about taking acid and even playing on acid.
Yes.
There's a story about a Kool-Aid thing where acid was dumped in. Is that a truth?
Well, yeah.
You guys were playing and kids freaked out.
It's true. It's definitely true. It happened more than once, but it was the sort of thing where rather than that wasn't what we did,
Yeah.
What we did was always pretty much the same, which was to play music, and that's been our main concern, no matter how weird it got, But because of the times and because of what was going on, there was all the inevitable dealer, who would come and feel that, in an altruistic gesture would say, well, here's this jar of apple juice, and I have a convenient 300 hits of mescaline here, and I'll just pop it in.
Treat everybody.
Well, yeah, right. Something along those lines. And then, of course, if you didn't know what was going on and you drank a glass, and this happened to me countless times, It's not like something that happened to innocent victims in the audience. It happened to everybody, I number myself amongst those victims.
Victims, yes.
And it would be that sort of thing. There was no way to gauge really what there was, because the whole thing was enveloped in secrecy.
Yeah. How much, Jerry, were drugs? Is it blown up? How much? There certainly was a counterculture. You all were very much a part of it. You yourself are even spoken of as the guru, the leader, the spokesperson for that rock counterculture. And how big a part of that whole movement was drugs? I think it has kind of a happy ending. It certainly does for you all.
Well, I think the drugs were important insofar as that they were a way for people to find out that there was more going on than what they had previously considered to be reality. There was another level of reality, or maybe lots of levels. I think that experience in my life, that experience has proved to be more valuable than most of the other things that have happened to me in my life. Remember that I'm a person who leads a sort of limited existence. I play. And a lot of my time is devoted to practicing, and I'm focused and it's fairly singular. You know what I mean? That's what I do. I don't really do much else. So in terms of what's available to me is experience, not too much. And being able to, back in the days when LSD was legal, and it wasn't a crime to take it, or it wasn't a crime to change yourself, for me, it was an incredible opening up. I mean, it made me realize that there was a lot more than what I even suspected, and I suspected a lot.
Isn't that amazing? With all of the travel, with the reading, and you're into art, you're into filmmaking now.
That's true.
You've cut over 40 albums, or been involved in them. You're into engineering. You all have the most famous, in any case, sound system in the world.
Right.
All of these interests and this, what most people would think of as a variety of experience, you think of yourself as somewhat insulated or isolated, or
right, because, well, basically I'm functional. I do the things that I'm supposed to do. And I'm interested in doing them, and always intended to do them. So I don't feel bad about it, but I realize that it's somewhat limited.
Are there other ways when you talk about the high now? I know that you're more concerned about health, and
Yeah.
you've talked about consistency, things that drugs won't do, that
Oh, yeah,
militate
right.
against. So you're
Yeah.
not into the drug thing now. How do you get these highs? Is the spiritual a part of this?
Well,
spiritual consciousness?
Yeah, yeah, it is, of course. I mean, that's part of the whole consciousness. I mean, really, I'd like to make one point clear about drugs. First of all, I don't feel a certain specific fixed way about drugs. I think that the worst thing about drugs is that they're illegal, you know, and I think that that's the real thing that creates problems on all those levels, and that's just my own observation. And it doesn't mean that make all drugs legal or anything like that. I'm not saying that, but that's what I think.
That leads to
I
most
think that
of
that's
the
what's
problems.
really wrong about it, you know, more than anything else. No worse than drinking coffee, say, you know. What's a drug? You know, what's a drug?
We have drug stores.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, all that.
Yeah.
I think the thing of getting high is really what we were all sort of into at the time, and the what that means is something that I can't really say what it means. I can't put a name to it other than getting high, and the people who know what I'm talking about know what I'm talking about. I'm assuming. Anybody who doesn't know what I'm talking about, either they haven't gotten high.
I gotta go.
You know. Oh, pardon
We'll
me.
be right back.
Okay.
With you all and Jerry Garcia and the Grateful Dead, and we'll get high. Tell us.
Great.
We're just sitting here in the old studio at KPIX, exchanging altar boy stories from the good old days, and finding out that even Jerry Garcia, the leader of the Dead, has a few altar boys. How does
older boy?
How does a nice Roman Catholic boy like you, Jerry? I should be more serious. We ended the segment talking about turning people on, and from a spiritual vantage point, or within a spiritual consciousness-raising context.
Yeah.
And that kind of ties in with the fact that you were born and raised a Catholic, or maybe it doesn't. I think that has something to do with the beauty in your music and your art, the drama of your religious
heritage. It does have
heritage.
something to do with it, yeah. It probably has something to do with the thing of intensely wanting not to blow it, you know. I don't want to be guilty, you know.
Do you still feel that?
Oh, a certain amount, but no,
responsibility?
not really. So I was sort of a laissez-faire Catholic. You know, my parents were loose Catholics rather than devout Catholics, and so it was the kind of thing where they would send me to church. You know.
Oh, that doesn't last.
No, it didn't. It didn't. You know, it didn't take really, and I wasn't exposed to the real heavy stuff, Catholic church, Catholic school, and so forth. You know. My brother got that, but I missed it.
Jerry, your parents, your dad left when you were very young. Your mom raised you and worked, and I heard her death in, what, 69, 70, had a real impact on you. She was very important for you.
Well, yeah. It was just strange, you know. I mean, it's like, once they're gone, that's it, you know. It's that flash, which I was aware of, really, but I was never really very close to my mother, so I felt that, well, you know, that there's something that I wasn't able to complete. You know, there's something that I didn't really do. I never was able to say to her that I thought you did okay, you know. I was never able to finish that idea, but I don't feel that really our relationship, I don't feel as though it's gone forever. I feel as though more like that was underlying throughout, you know what I mean? That she always respected what I did and liked the fact that I was a musician and liked what I was doing and so forth, and she never judged me, even through things like involvement with drugs and stuff like that. You know, she was always pretty good, and so I don't feel really too badly about it, but it's a shock, you know, like those things, like things like that always are. And but on another level, of course, it's interesting how once your parents are gone, you know.
Like the foundation.
They're gone,
like,
you know. That's
what
it.
do you plug into?
Yeah, it's strange. On some levels, it's liberating. On other levels, it's very sad. You know.
Yeah. Jerry, one thing, I have to make this comment. It may sound like a departure from where we are, but I think people would expect Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead, who does not appear on television, they would expect, on meeting you this close, a much more sort of, I don't know, far out, flamboyant, you know, heavy dude type swinger. I don't know. I think we have stereotypes of musicians and stereotypes of certainly the Grateful Dead, Jefferson Airplane. There's a whole mystique about the Dead and about Jerry Garcia, and you're very real, very believable, very normal, dare I say. Am I blowing your whole image?
No, I don't think so.
Are you conscious of that, a kind of disparity between who you really are and what people expect of you?
Well, sure, because it works both ways too. I mean, on some levels, the media relation to the reality it's always wrong. I believe. I believe it never is very accurate because of just everything. Language itself is one heavy bias. So it's. But I've been described both ways, more radically than I am, more conservatively than I am. So there's a discrepancy on either level, you know what I mean? I don't really feel that, I don't relate to that, for one thing. I sort of taught myself that early, not to believe that that's who I am, I mean, that's not me.
Yeah.
And so I don't relate to it, and luckily the kind of fame that I'm involved in, whatever, such as it is low enough of a profile so that I'm not constantly being reminded of it.
People don't run up for autographs
right.
and
no,
so forth.
No, it's much cooler than that.
And yet people talk about, and maybe there's a difference between you when you're on stage performing, communicating musically, and you sitting here, as you said, using words.
Right.
Because people talk about the saint-like quality. Well, I don't mean it in a negative way, but there is an aura about you, whether you're aware of it or whether people put it there. And it's like the thing you were saying before. I thought very meaningfully. I said to you how my churches are empty. I need this crazy tube to reach young people.
Right.
You don't. You can go to Winterland and fill the place up with tens of thousands of young people, and you said, yeah, and I feel responsible.
Yeah.
I am concerned about that. I think it's that kind of a leadership, not an egomania, but a concern. Hey, here I am because of my talent, because of timing, because of any number of...
Yeah, right.
Here I am,
right.
And what am I... I know that you put words down and say, well, words are often lies because you can never communicate the whole feeling, the whole meaning, and music does it better. You've said that many times because it's freer, it's more open, and it allows for people to come in at different levels with different backgrounds. And so forth. But you are communicating something.
Well, I try to make an effort to, certainly.
What is? Can you describe that or talk about that?
Oh, well... It's difficult since the things that concern me tend to be not verbal in nature. They tend to be experiential. The fact is that most of my life has to do with certain kinds of experience that have been repeated, like many times. The high energy experience of playing for a large body of people and for the purpose of reaching some level, And so that energy and that thing is something that I know about, but I can't say what it is. So what I talk about, if I can talk about things, I try to make it so that what the content of what I'm saying is, reflects something that I know on that level. I can't say it, so I have to not say it. I have to talk around it or something.
Your music does that too, doesn't it?
Right.
And you sort of throw out little snatches, little phrase, thought things. There isn't a whole neat package of it.
No,
it's just
there isn't.
Bother you.
Right.
Oh, wait a minute.
Right.
You mean I have to think? I have to...
Yeah, I personally feel that people like that. I mean, I know I do, and it's on some levels it's all very simple, and on other levels it's difficult to talk about.
Yeah. You're very conscious of, I think the Grateful Dead probably have done more, certainly they're one of the most generous major groups in the country. They've done more free concerts and spontaneous gigs and fundraising things and stuff, but you're very much aware of this continuous sort of feed and be fed, the interaction between you and the audience, which you say can't be captured, obviously, in a record or even in a film. You're doing a film now, on the last 5 shows at the Winterland, and to see, I mean, maybe some experience can be communicated in film as it can in television.
That's
and
what we. Well, yeah, that's why we tried it. You know,
Yeah.
Can it happen? You know, maybe it can, and maybe it can. You know.
Yeah. It might work. Well, it's not working too well on TV. The midnight specials and so forth.
No,
Even with all their cameras, you can't.
Well, I think it reduces it too much. You know, that particular kind of experience, I think it just reduces, makes it too small. You know, that's one level of it. But
The hard thing is that you don't get any kind of feedback then, because you're not into fame and money.
no, but I'm into a more direct kind of feedback. I like to be in a situation where I can really talk to the people who like our music. You know, and we have a pretty good two-way flow that they write to us pretty freely, and by and large, they're pretty articulate. They know what we're doing, and we recognize them by the way they speak to us. You know what I mean? So we know that what they're talking about is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And so that we know we're aware of that reciprocal thing.
That's amazing. I know you send out, you have a mailing list of 35,000 or something, and you send out a preview. What are they called? Sampler, you know, audition copies of the albums before they, or the records. I think.
And they send stuff to us too. You know, they talk to us and tell us about what it's
like. That's a big part of you, that collaborative effort. Because I know in the beginning your music was eclectic. You started with the jug band kind of bluegrass sound, even banjo, guitar, and then got into the whole thing, blues and jazz, and which is a great thing. And you kind of explored all those ramifications, and now you're into a whole new form for creating, where you do listen to at all different levels.
Right. Well, it's because it's more interesting from the standpoint of a person who's involved in lots of different kinds of energy. That is what's interesting to me, and on a certain level, that is what I do. Also, I deal with lots of different kinds of energy, and I feel that I'm essentially someone who works into things. You know, rather than I'm not an artist in the solo or in the independent artist in the Garrett mold. You know, I'm not that sort of person.
Follow me, gang.
Right. I'm part of dynamic situations, and that's where I like it, and that's where I feel I function best. And the Grateful Dead is a collection of people, or all people who've come to that idea, you know, all through various different ways, and it works. You know, that's really all we have to say about what we do. You know, if you want to see it work, if you want to see a situation work that doesn't have any leader, that doesn't have any plan, or doesn't and is utterly formless, really, from moment to moment, then you know, you don't have to guess about whether something like that will work. We have it, and it's working. You know? And
how can you do that without bumping egos?
Well, we bump egos. But I think, everybody has learned that the best things happen when everybody agrees and feels that that's the right thing to do, rather than one person has an idea and everybody else feels a little funny about it. So we go on that level of, if somebody doesn't like it, we don't do it. And we've learned to trust each other after a long enough time of fiddling around with this idea. We've learned to trust each other to the point of saying, well, if Kreutzmann doesn't like it, it's no good. And that idea comes from the idea of basically that no idea really makes it if you can't include everybody in it. If you can't bring everybody.
You know what this is sounding like? Marriage. Or a good marriage, or a good family.
Well, I think it's just a good way for people to work together. And of course, it depends on what they're doing. I think you probably run into trouble if you were trying to build a bridge. You know, you can't improvise on that level too well. But I believe that if you had people that were all really skilled at that particular world, that they could do it. Because on another level, I mean, on the mathematics level, architecturally, musically, that's what the Grateful Dead does. Is we're creating architectures. You know, architectural models, if you will, of kinds of music, and they work, and each person adds their own personality to the whole thing, and it works. You know, somehow. And I think that everything could be that way, really.
Jerry, when you talk about energy, what's the source of your own? You know, I think energy, we had the old-fashioned word we used to use a lot was faith, or the spirit, grace, life, enthusiasm, whatever. But what is the source? Where do you go to prime the pump?
Well, enthusiasm, that you almost said, but then enthusiasm. I think, the thing of feeling good about it is, like, really, as far as I'm concerned, that's the gold in the situation. That's the payoff, if there is one, on the level of why am I involved? I'm involved because I like it and because it feels good. And the enthusiasm of feeling good about something, you know, I think that's the most important thing about it is, on a personal level. Like, what do I get out of it? That's what I get out of it. And I don't think that I could do anything for any other reason. I couldn't. Nothing else would be that. Nothing else would be that kind of a payoff. I don't.
Riches, fame, power. Well, it shows. It shows in you. You've also described music as your yoga, as your meditation.
Right, and by that I just mean that I think that it's a good thing to have some one thing that you can work on a more or less a daily basis and be able to see improvement in your own terms that is a result only of your own energy being put into the thing, you know what I mean? It's the kind of thing, anything that you decided to do, if you did it every day and it was something that you could notice yourself improving, even if it was whatever it was, cat's cradles, crossword puzzles,
prayer,
right,
rosary, these
whatever.
Are all forms.
Sure, they're all forms, and I think that the things that keep opening in front of you, the more you do them, the better you get at them. That idea, I think, is really a nice idea to have in your life. It keeps you centered to something, You don't have to be worried about how you're being judged in some absolute sense, but you can judge your own progress on a day-to-day basis. And when you're doing something like that, you know when you're off, and you know when you're on.
You're on. We're off. Thank you, Jerry Garcia, for the discipline and the sharing and the growing. Thank you all. We'll see you next week. Believe. God bless us all. Please.